minute or so, just waiting for it to stream. That's all we're waiting for right now. Sometimes technology is the best thing, isn't it? And the worst. Minute or so. Okay, we're live. There we are. Everybody, God, we're in for a great session today. This is Sukhi Wahiwala, your host this evening, and this is the Empower Hour with reference to and sponsored by Salam Radio here in our good old Peterborough with the Salam Radio application. So if you're listening on the app, welcome. If you're listening on YouTube Live on the official Sukhi Wahiwala official channel, then welcome once again, and the inspired tribe and all of our local followers to the show in all continents, would you believe? Welcome to episode 69. I can't actually believe it's been running for 69 sessions, but you know what? Sometimes in service of the world, we have to make all these achievements public sometimes, but there we are. So today we have with us somebody you can see, I'm sure, on the screen there right next to me. His name is Master Lak Loi, but I'm about to give him an introduction before we talk about his journey with us for the next hour. This is the Empower Hour show. We focus on landed, successful individuals, heightened individuals, people who have taken their world in service of others, assisted other people to find their inner light. This is what the Empower Hour journeys are all about. And trust me, between yourself and I have been waiting for best part of a year to get into the diary of Master Lak Loi, or Sifu, or in my personal opinion, I like to call him Sijo. Sijo in specific is when a person creates their own philosophy around something. He indefinitely is the master that he truly will. You'll see in a moment. He is Sifu Master Lak Loi, who is, in his humble words, by the way, a white collar warrior, somebody who's had a background of IT in engineering, and in his early 20s made a shift from his hometown in Leicester to central London to live that achieved high-end life of finances and in the investment structures and IT structure as well. Had a second feather to his cap in specific around an inner awakening about his own journey and led him back into a martial art of some kind. In specific, he is a third generation Jeet Kune Do, which is a Jeet Kune Do master which basically leads from our one and only Bruce Lee himself. I am so proud, humbled to call him a brother, to call him somebody that I have spent many hours of discussion with. And we really wanted to bring him to the world for everybody in our community, Inspired Tribe, if you don't already know him, and the Salam Radio community. Welcome, Master Lak Loi.
Thank you so much for having me, Sukhi, and thank you for all the viewers and listeners for taking their time this evening to share with us today.
Oh, amazing. Do you know what? One of the most humblest achieved individual that we're going to get the good fortune of sharing some lovely time with. Honestly, team, our tribe, this is a treat. It's personally one of my achievements I wanted to have. I mean, I really have been chasing this man for over a year. It's taken COVID to slow down his contract work, his day job, his white collar stuff, to even be able to schedule in his diary to catch in the evenings, because mostly on the times that we go live, he's usually got a live show, a live class or something that he's helping the world with. He's constantly in service of others. We're going to get very close with him. Like, I just want to ask you some really, really personal questions. Sorry, we're not going to give you any soft conversation here. This is what the Inspired Tribe talks about. We're real and to the point. That's why people watch us every single week.
Dive in.
You better bet. You see, guess why? Audience, in case you've worked out that I have a screen, a video screen that separates me from his physicality. So I know right this very second, if I can be cheeky with him, I'm not going to get clobbered. I'm really kind of calling it that one. You know, it's kind of cool.
As Bruce Lee said, you know, there's no point in dry land swimming. You've got to jump in the water.
I'm very happy on this side of the camera, my brother. Okay, guys. So, Lak, please help us understand. We've only got an hour together, and somehow I want to almost spend 5 hours with you in your conversation. You're an individual who's authored 3 brilliant books. I had the good fortune of being a part of your world in the original cultivation, using your words, of the very first the first Born book. We'll talk about both and three of the books later, if that's okay. But I want to start about you as an individual. Like, you know, standing there being a master of your mind and spirit to a certain extent, being in service of others and of light as a light warrior. I ask a question: where have you come from? Where are you born? What's your hometown? You know, how many siblings, how many brothers and sisters do you have, if any?
Born and raised, or should I say, born, bred and buttered in Leicester, set up in the Midlands. Yeah, mom's from Birmingham, so yeah, very Midland-centric upbringing. I am one of three children. I'm the eldest, and my brother's the middle one, so he's 1 year younger than me, and my sister's 4 years younger than me. So three of us. Me and my brother, yeah, because we're quite close in age, we're very similar, and they always say the younger ones kind of grow up really, really quickly. Yeah. And we grew up and we were kind of equals in that sense. And, you know, as an elder brother, you got to constantly remind him you're younger than me.
So at no point did I make any connotation towards using violence against your younger brother. So do not be doing that, audience.
No.
So, like, that's wonderful. So a little question on that. Is it okay if I can just get the authority from yourself, if I may, that I can call you Lak through this interview, if that's okay?
Absolutely.
Thank you. So, Lak, I have a question to ask yourself, and there's a humble journey, right? You're definitely a man of my heart on many levels. Humble journey, one of three children in Leicester. But I also know a little Dicky Bird's told me a few things about you. And certain two brothers were very hard to maintain and control at a young age. So there was something that I think your ingenious parents, in specific your father, noticed, that there was a kind of like a tentativeness towards something. So this is going to be very funny for him to listen to. How did your dad and mum manage to feed you boys when you were younger?
So father, in all of his wisdom, actually an early adopter of technology himself, to be honest, was an avid film watcher. I'd say film watcher because he'd borrow a VHS recorder from his friend, one of his best friends, and would borrow it every other weekend. And then it wasn't long before, you know, he went out and bought his own. And this was when VHS recorders were very rare to have. So it was commonplace to know somebody in a community that had one. And Dad loved his movies. So he went from borrowing a VHS recorder from a friend. At that time, I think it was a borrowed VHS recorder. I don't know, but my dad was into martial arts. Yes. And the problem statement was, how do you get two young boys that are 13 months apart, therefore where, you know, there was a time where we're both in nappies, for instance, and you know, all of that mess. How do you tame two young boys to sit down quietly that have got a lot of energy to eat and feed, so, you know, parents can nourish them, nurture them, make them grow, and so on.
Most parents, sorry to interject there, but most parents will definitely be with you on that. They'll understand very clearly how much of a challenge that can be, especially with the boys. I mean, you know, honestly, young ladies, babies, daughters, whichever, they usually tend to be less of a handful in the sense of they're much more maternal, such beautiful souls. And when you get us ruffians like boys are just going to wreck everything apart, it's very hard to get hold of them, and especially when you've got such beautiful two energies that tight together. Now I'm just going to, just if I don't mind, if I just question something here, this is going to be circa mid-70s, right? Because you're talking about VHS. Now, a lot of our listeners are quite younger. They're not really quite sure what VHS, that means video recorder, those tapes with magnetic spools. And it was absolutely true. One of my very close cousins, they started off having a VHS recorder, which they ended up lending to people with videos to watch.
Yeah.
Is that kind of what we were talking about?
Exactly what we're talking about. And you got to remember, if you forget one of the cables, you can't watch it. You got to go back to your uncle's house or whoever you're borrowing it from, you know. in fact, I've never really told the story, but we used to refer, you know, anybody that's really close to the family, you always call it uncle or auntie, right?
Absolutely.
In Indian culture. And so we used to actually call that uncle Vidyawala uncle.
How amazing is that? Vidyawala uncle, which basically for the English speaking audiences that are following this video is obviously video. Wala is the man of uncle. So the uncle with the video. Oh, great. So in context of this, so I can set the scene for everybody here. You've got a video, a VHS. You've got a lovely pop-up in those days. I think it used to pop up the top. We hadn't quite got to the slide in the front JVC type slickness. And then we call them the piano keys. You remember that? So it was one of those moments. You put a VHS in the front, push the top down, and your dad had correlated his love of martial arts and the fact that you guys wouldn't eat. So talk more.
We want to sit still. So he managed to get a copy of, I've got to say, it was probably Big Boss or Fist of Fury. Now I always kind of get mixed up which one it was first, but it's quite young, and I'm talking about 3. You know, around about that kind of age. So my brother's about 2-ish. So my dad puts in, I'm gonna go with Big Boss because I'm pretty sure that came first. Yeah. Sticks in Big Boss, and next thing you know is, you know, mesmerized. I was certainly mesmerized. My brother, he obviously went quieter, maybe because I was quiet, and I was like, you know, and the food just goes in. And
this is Bruce Lee's movies. If anybody doesn't know, the Big Boss is a Bruce Lee movie. Yes.
And I specifically remember when Dad said this one's called Fists of Fury, and I thought, whoa, that is such an awesome name, you know? How that's saying something. And 3-4 years old, like, you know, it's really hard to remember that it's so long ago, so young at that time. But I will say this: we were literally drip-fed Bruce Lee movies, and that became a part of my DNA, my structure inherently, which would later on come out, which I had no idea how that would unravel itself.
Wonderful. This is just so beautiful, and you're gonna hear this beautiful legacy and journey very shortly. Lak, I'm not sure if you've got something that's on maybe the keyboard near the microphone. I think every time the hand goes down, it's some kind of cracking that comes through, just like that. Yeah. So if you just move it aside to keep that clear, then thank you. Apologies for anybody who's getting interference. That's actually, this is the power of live TV. This is what it's all about. So back to the journey. It was that, you see, we're all in the same place. There we are. So thank you for that. So just a conversation here. And so you've already been influenced by Bruce Lee, by your father in a conscious way to get you to adorn food. And then obviously this has become a part of your life. But if I'm correct, I mean, what was schooling like? Because with martial arts or with watching these movies, you could become very much more physical, if you understand what I'm trying to say. But what was school like for you?
School, raised in the 70s, 80s, it was, my parents came from India with nothing, and they came as teenagers. My mom was a bit younger than that, so she was pre-teenager. So when they eventually got married, they had nothing. They were laborers, so they started from ground zero upwards, as did most of the immigrants from India at that time.
We're still getting the interference there, by the way. I'm not sure whether something's being tapped on. It's just a cable or something. I'm not sure. But Karen, please. It's very loud. That's the only reason why. Thanks.
And so I forgot, lost my train.
Parents were labor force, and they came over quite young in the 60s and 16, the teens.
Yeah.
And they had to integrate into society in Leicester.
So we lived in not one of the nicest areas, let's put it that way. And the school was kind of rough as well. And in that era, the 70s and 80s, racism was rife. And there were no measures around it. There was no such thing as political correctness. Racism wasn't recognized as a thing, and it was condoned. So school and school playground and the streets, walking to school, walking home, was full of racism. And quite frankly, if somebody shouted a racist comment to me, I would confront it. It was inside me. What I now realize was awake then, but I didn't recognize it for what it was an inner conscious warrior that didn't stand for injustice to the self, nor injustice to others. And that became apparent as I cultivated that sort of consciousness through my martial process.
Love it. That's beautiful. And so in essence, you stood up for yourself, you stood up for the people around yourself, because at that era, and we are talking 70s and early 80s, as you said yourself, it was just not aware that indifferences are okay, and it's we and you, it was a you and an us type scenario. So, you know, if anybody has in any way received any kind of racial contention in their life and they are still going through this by any chance, but obviously we are broadcasting live, please reach out to school, to teachers, to parents, and do not stop until you actually have somebody who is listening to you to assist you. And there are plenty of governmental platforms. Just Google it and assist. So just as a thank you from both of ourselves, if you can. So Lak, if I may share, in this journey with reference to your student and your children, you also, I think your dad realized that you had this knack for martial arts as well. Logically, it was because of the in connection with reference to Bruce Lee, but also you studied martial arts at a young age. So can you just tell us a little bit about what that journey was like?
I'd rephrase that. I'm not sure Dad thought we had a knack for martial arts. I think it was more when you expose two young boys to Bruce Lee, that's literally, you know, throwing people around, kicking and punching them to pieces. You know, and all of the movies have a just cause.
Yeah.
Two little boys are going to start mirroring and mimicking that behavior. So we used to play fight a lot.
I was going to say, even amongst each other, yeah.
Yeah. So me and him would start play fighting, and you know, he was pretty much grew up and he was about the same size as me, even though he's a year younger than me, which is very annoying. And you know, constantly reminding him, you're the younger one, you know, maybe slightly weaker, but you get to a point where, you know, it was a fair enough challenge. So you play fight, and you know, half the time it's fun, and the other half you start getting upset with one another. But the beauty about kids is you play, and you can get into loggerheads with each other, and then you can let go and just move on naturally. So half an hour later, 15 minutes later, even 5 minutes later, you're playing again. So you're back to normal. And so Dad got really fed up. Mum, more importantly, got even more fed up because she had to deal with this. And Dad figured out, all right, these boys need to release this energy. I'll stick them in some physical activity. They are clearly like martial arts. So the good thing that he did was he found a martial arts school. This martial arts school was in his local working men's club, where he would go have a jar or a few for a couple of hours while we would be slugging it out for 2 hours in this freezing cold concrete floor dojo. Honestly, it was absolutely freezing in there. I've never remember a single day there that it was nice and warm.
And let me make this clear. Your dad, the most cleverest man on this planet, realized that a really easy way of getting a control of this context and also having some social time with his buddies was really cool, where at his local, they actually had a dojo in essence. And he thought, hang on, I'll take these two boys, leave them there, let them freeze, let them get taught a few lessons whilst I socialize. That is just genius.
Absolute genius. And that journey went from 7 years old to 11 years old. So 4 years Shotokan karate. And
Shotokan. Oh wow.
Shotokan karate. And I remember to this day asking Dad, I'm like, Dad, what we're doing doesn't feel or look like what Bruce is doing in his movies. And he, you know, Dad in his innocence didn't know the difference between one martial art and another martial art. And for him, karate, karate, ekko hi cheez hai, all right? In other words,
That means it's all the same thing.
karate, kung fu is all the same thing. Bless him, you know. And
Couldn't be further away from the truth, but yes.
We just carried on. We just carried on because we didn't have a choice. So, but it was, as I say, character defining moments like this that carried on. And the funny part of that and school was the altercations at school were happening before the martial arts journey started. Right. Once the martial arts journey started and people find out, hey, you're training in karate, it got worse.
It got worse? Oh, wow.
Because people think, oh, you're doing martial arts, let me test you out.
I'll have a go. Now, honestly, Lak, if I may share, this reminds me very much so of a school playground scenario. Well, it's really a playground. You know, we call it a playground, but it was in secondary school. So I can remember two individuals. One was a very close friend of mine called Resham, who ended up working for me many years later and was still in contact, would you believe? And another gentleman called Simon Osborne. And it was much around exactly what you just said. Resham was the Taekwondo boy, and he was a martial artist. And Simon was much more of I suppose he was much more in the rough area. He used to enjoy it. Very clever man, but very clever lad. But he wanted to test his parameters. So actually Resham became a target per se, even though he wasn't the one aggressing, he was going to get picked on. Does that make sense? I mean, that sounds similar to what happened to your world.
Yeah, it was very much so. So it was a double-edged sword in a way, but like anything, cultivating any sword from a blunt instrument to start with takes time.
Yes.
So just because you've attended a few classes, you haven't really got anything in the bag at that time.
Well, this is what I realized after doing a short stint of martial arts as well with Renshin Kai as a karate, with that it actually gives you some tools. But my sensei was very close to my brother. His name was Steve Lawrence, and what he did is he had like this open hand, and my brother, I can remember specifically, my brother taking me to the dojo saying, "Here's my brother, Steve. If he is out of line in any way, you've got my authority to do anything you need to do." And I was like, there's a little 7-year-old going, "What?
You just thrown me under the bus."
I thought you were my brother, and I thought you loved me, kind of thing. But then he ended up throwing me over there and saying, "Just deal with him. Whatever needs to be done, teach him to be a man."
Yeah. Tough love.
Tough love, yeah. But in essence of my brother, he was the apple of my eye. You know, he basically was somebody that I wanted to be, and still is. And in the same context, I'm sure with yourself, my sensei was very, very emotionally switched on, and it was nothing like that. Actually, he really did keep me on course, but he would give me the look.
Yeah,
give me the look when his back straightened up. You know, that's enough. So that kind of discipline didn't do me any harm. So just if I can lead this into another conversation, we usually talk about significant moments, or what I call a life-defining moment in your world. Can I ask you a personal question, Lak? You're such a revered sensei. You're such an amazing individual human being and a spirit light worker with gratitude. And I mean, genuinely, a good friend, a good human being, but also somebody who's very inspirational to be around. And I always find that behind every individual that I've met who are like that, they've always had something that's defined them, something that switched them on in life to make them realize that this life is real. What was that moment for you?
So for me, there was what I call the happiest and the scariest day of my life. And that was a day, I was 29, and it was a day I found out that my wife was expecting, so we were going to have our first child.
Lovely.
So, you're ecstatic, can't believe it. And at the same note, we found out that I was in living in San Francisco at the time, working for one of the investment banks in the trading system space. We found out that my Wall Street consultancy had gone bust because it was post.com bust.
Oh.
Okay. It was a post-dot-com boom. So it was a dot-com bust that was in full motion at that time.
98, 99, circa 2000. Yes.
This was 2002, 2003. Sorry,
Yeah.
2003.
Mm-hmm.
And so 2000 and 2001, they were the peak. Even 2002, that was happy times. The gravy train. But 2003, it all started falling apart. and on top of that, I was in corporates. So they turned around and said, look, you got 2 weeks to vacate your apartment. So on the same day, we got this amazing news that my daughter was about to be born. And on the same day, my consultancy goes bust. So I don't have a job. And on top of that, we've got 2 weeks to vacate our apartment. And to add another thing, I'm out in San Francisco, so 6,000 miles away from home. Yeah. And this is before anything's happened. So
wow, I'm just going to clarify something, just if I may. That is deep. So as you said yourself, the happiest day, and also possibly, the most challenging day, fearful day of your life as well, being knowing that you both yourself and Nina, your wife, have been actually blessed to bring another life into this world, another light. And at the same time, 6,000 miles away from home, at the peak of your potential, at 29, realizing, oops, I've got 2 weeks before my current world, which I thought was very stable, is totally destabilized. So what did you do?
So we managed to work out, stay with the company that was contracting for, but their stipulation was you need to come back to New York. Mm-hmm. And we really loved the California life, having lived there for 3.5 years, and we really wanted our firstborn to be born in California. But at least we could say she's, at heart of hearts, she's a California baby, right?
Yes.
So we ended up moving back to New York and settling in New York. But we both of us didn't want to live in New York. We didn't want to raise our child in New York. I don't think, many people, millions of people do live there.
Yes.
But it wasn't right for us. So
it wasn't the right fit for yourself. That's the key. Yeah.
And also I'd kind of got to a space where I was burnt out. I was already burnt out. Straight out of uni, been working. In fact, to be honest with you, I'd taken up summer jobs and Saturday jobs since the age of 13. Wow. So I'd been working all the way through, and then it was full time after uni, and I literally managed to get a job two weeks after university finished, which I was very grateful for. Wow. And so that went on, but the investment banking lifestyle was quite intense as well.
And you're all constantly studying as well to try and expand that mindset because of the investment banking as per se, isn't it, as well? It's very grueling.
Yeah, so my background was computer science, software engineering. So you need to assimilate all the business knowledge. So it was the cash equities, trading systems, and the cash equities arena that I was in. So understanding that whole process. The beauty about it was I went into the Wall Street space at that time where most of the trading floors were manual. So
right, so you've got
that whole thing be digitized over the years to the point now where it's been done and saturated, and there's very little innovation in that space now. But that time was intense.
Yeah, and obviously less uses of human beings as well. So I just want to bring you back to the point of that significant moment when that happened, all those moments. What changed in your world? What did you do?
So I felt like, I think the burnout had a big contribution towards this, and I felt I was unhappy. I didn't want to be there. I wanted to go back to UK because that's where all our family structures are and social support is. And I wanted to go back there because I wanted our daughter to have the grandparents and the uncles and aunts and so on.
The extended family.
My wife didn't. She wanted to have the baby in America because she wanted to have dual citizenship. And the things, I could just feel like the calm before the storm brewing.
Yes.
And during that time, I was kind of getting continually, I would say, depressed and
Wow.
stuck in that rut. And
yeah. So was that a feeling of, if I can just ask the question, was that a feeling of, I suppose you could say despair, but also lack of control and not knowing, insecure future, not knowing where you are?
yeah, yeah, all of the above, all of the above.
Mm-hmm.
And then one day, this funny thing happened. We're in New York, and it was 3 months. No, must have been 6 months before the baby was born. So my wife's into their first trimester,
Mm-hmm.
and I have this compulsion right here, right? Like something's punching, trying to get at me, saying, "You need to find Bruce Lee's teachings."
Wow.
And I'm like, "What the hell is this?" Right? And I'm like, "Yeah, I can remember those Bruce Lee movies when I was a kid and so on, but what is this all about?" And it was, and where I was mentally wasn't in a good place, but to have that was so clear. And also on top of that, it was, this is going to get you through this. You need this because there's something beyond this. And that was it.
There's something that's sticking in my brain here. Sorry, Lax, to interrupt or seem like interrupting, but it's relevant. Now, as a child, you were brought up on Bruce Lee. Your dad introduced Bruce Lee into your world under the contemplation that somehow these 3 to 5-year-old boys, or 3 to 4-year-old boys, stayed quiet whilst watching these movies. Now, even there, it sounds like a bit of a calling that most children at that age don't spend much time watching Bruce Lee, martial arts. It doesn't really interest them. But you did. And not only that, you were submissive to an extent. So then he introduced the actual process to your world by introducing some form of karate. But let me get this clear. Do you sometimes feel that there's some kind of an open loop? And I know you definitely are a light warrior. You understand this now. But at the time, you didn't know this, but you said you had something pumping from your solar plex trying to get out.
Yeah.
Now, how amazing is this? It's been introduced as a child, and you've forgotten it in most of your adult life. And then at 29, it's just kicking back out. And it's not only that, it's calling you to tell you, you need this to get through this tight spat.
And to make it worse, one, I didn't know Bruce had left any teachings around. Two, I didn't know there was a martial art that Bruce had given a name to.
Oh, wow.
Three, you couldn't find anything on Google because Google although Google was
there, but it wasn't active.
Set up 2 years before, it had nothing. There was no information in there. So you might remember the search engines of the day were Netscape and Lycos, right? So we're talking really pre-internet boom.
Absolutely.
And
even then, there was nothing to find.
Nothing to find.
There was nothing there. There was nothing there.
I put Bruce Lee in, and it didn't even know who Bruce Lee was.
Yeah, it's very hard for the young generation to understand that. But it was empty.
Yeah, it was an empty space. So it was very pre-informational age, but the structures for the information age were being laid down, the foundations for that.
Absolutely. So how did this make you feel? What action did you take? I mean, obviously you didn't find those things. There was nothing there, but you had this calling to touch into some kind of Bruce Lee vibe per se.
So at that time, I was consulting at different investment banks for the company I was working for, implementing, integrating our trading platform, which is one of the world-leading trading platforms. And one of my friends that I used to work with in San Francisco that also moved over to New York because of that whole .com fallout. A lot of the New York-based trading houses ended up consolidating their businesses back to New York. Despite 9/11, right? We should think, all right, distributing things would be safe. But so he was working for an investment bank that actually was hard hit by the whole 9/11 thing. And they had set up a satellite office in another investment bank that had loaned them some space, right? And that was in Midtown. And at that time, I was an avid gym goer, which I still am, which is obviously a bit difficult. So we're working at home at the moment. But I used to be a member of a New York Health and Racquet Club. So wherever I was, there was a gym
somewhere.
a few blocks away that you could just pop into. And I remember going into, I think it was a 46th Street New York Health and Racquet Club. And, I spent 3 months trying to find Bruce's martial art, whatever it is. I even went to Wushu temple in just south of Times Square.
Times Square, okay. And wushu being kung fu, yes.
Yeah, kung fu. And, none of those things resonated with me at that time. And I walked past the studio as I was going into the gym floor, and the studio was on my left, and there's a piece of paper, and I just remember I wasn't even looking at it, and these words just kind of slapped me on the side of my face saying, learn Bruce Lee's martial art. And I remember doing a and it just said, learn Bruce Lee's martial art, Jeet Kune Do. And that was it. The rest is history after that.
I definitely agree with you there. It's definitely history. And I just want to lead you to another point. If anybody's just joined me, I do apologize for the break there. But if you've just joined us, you really need to have a giggle, understand the wisdom, and actually understand how deep your inner callings truly can be. Please scrub back to the start of this particular interview and just watch it from the start if you've missed the start. We are here with Master Lak Loi on episode 69 of the Empower Hour show. This is amazing. I've been trying to grab hold of him for over a year now, so we've managed to locate him and managed to get him here. Lak, welcome back again. And I just want to continue the conversation a little bit. So you today are a revered third generation Bruce Lee JKD instructor. I call it instructor, but you're definitely a Sifu. And there's something inside you that holds you back from being called a Sijo, but that's between you and yourself, as I will always call you and refer to you as Sijo, which is a person who's actually incorporated their own methodology and ethos. Can I just ask a question? Like, today you are undoubtedly very, very successful with your own London schools of martial arts, and this is taking into out of the consideration of the fact that we could have lockdowns which restrict your movements, etc. But not only do you have these schools where I believe you're very, very integral to ethos and building people's inner padstones and bringing them into a centered spiritual way, but your wisdom is undeniable in this environment. Can you help us understand something about your current journey? You've written 3 books, brilliant books, by the way. And, one of them is biblical quality in the middle, which is your second book, I believe. We'll cover those in a second. But how did you get into now, obviously, at a certain stage, being connected to third generation of Bruce Lee's martial arts, Jeet Kune Do, JKD, and now you're training that, and you've been doing it for over 15 years, is that right? Maybe 10? Can you help me understand?
This is it would be my 17th year, I believe.
Wow, amazing. So literally you started over abroad and you've come back and you're continuing it. So in context of this principal conversation, tell me something about, why you chose to teach it, because it couldn't have been a financial reason. And as you said before, Bruce Lee's martial art was going to somehow chaperone you through this sticky period of your life.
So after discovering Bruce's martial art, I did go on a downward spiral. And I did end up in, I'd say, the bottom of the barrel. I ended up completely masterless. There was a bunch of events that happened that really left me, I felt broken and mentally, and I just stuck to the martial arts to keep me strong physically. I thought that would be the answer. And I thought that's why I had to do it. What I didn't bargain for, which I'd never give back, was that process, that martial process, was a process of cultivating my own self-mastery, having gone from masterlessness to build that up. And that gave me the methodology that helped recover myself first and foremost. And that was from a physical level to a mental and emotional level. And then there was the second defining moment, which happened many years later, which was 4 years ago from here, which was a spiritual awakening that opened the door into the spiritual aspect of life and a human being's journey. And because up until then, I'd even been teaching for many years, and I'd never spoke about that element or that aspect of martial arts because I didn't understand it.
Which is the spirit side of martial arts at the time.
Right.
They say that masters don't physically fight because obviously they've I've learned this from you, by the way, that masters don't physically fight. They just sort it out. They just basically discuss it, resolve it, and move on. And that has to come from an inner spiritual resonance, which I think was what you're talking about. Is that right?
There's absolutely, and there's three ways of fighting. Mm-hmm. You can fight physical to physical, mm-hmm. right? You can fight physical to energy, and then energy to energy, right? Wow. Now, energy to energy, you've got to be in a space that's beyond and outside of yourself. And you don't fight with it. You synchronize and synergize with it.
Align. I love it.
And you get to a point where you can repel that energy away from you because you no longer, you know that it doesn't serve you. It doesn't serve your community or the people that you're trying to do to help, because it will knock you off your off kilter, off your center. And you need to maintain that, because if you're in the space of seva and servitude, then it's important that you maintain that sacredity of being centered always.
Yeah.
And
fully understand that. Yeah.
When you get to that point, then you realize that those school days were an amazing learning, because it taught you back then to talk with your hands, to communicate through violence, because you didn't know how, you didn't have the mental, emotional, or spiritual intelligence to discuss and dissolve that in an intelligible way. In fact, to understand and go through violence uncontrolled gave you a bigger appreciation for peaceful resolve.
Love it. So it's like you're diffusing it without even. You use the art of your book is called Art of Fighting Without Fighting, or is it Thinking Without Thinking? What was the
Art of Thinking Without Thinking?
Which basically derives from the Art of Fighting Without Fighting from Bruce Lee. Is that right? Yes.
That's right. It's a spin on Bruce's famous quote from Enter the Dragon, when he's coming into the Hong Kong harbor, coming into Hong Kong. Well, yeah, he's coming into Hong Kong at that time, and he's got that rowdy. I think they're on the way to Han's Island, and they're having one of the competitors is a little bit cocky, and he just it is.
You're right.
He can't wait. He can't wait to fight. And he's like, okay, well, me and you, let's take that boat. And he lets him jump on the boat, and then they just let the boat out, and
off they go. I remember that. I love it.
And I think it was John Saxon that says, "What was that?" And he goes, "The art of fighting without fighting."
It's very true.
So that title was inspired by that quote, because it's quite poignant, because to not fight, to fight without fighting is really to have an intelligent response beyond physicality.
Yeah, in a spiritual way. So in your books, can I just ask you, if you don't mind, your very first book that you had there, this is very relevant, by the way. Do you have a copy of your book at all?
I do indeed.
Now, in this particular book, I have a copy of this 3.5, I think it was 4 years ago. It must have been. Wow, goodness me, what a time. And there was a particular section in there where you actually ironed out and help people, because most parents, and sometimes parents, have these challenges where we put our children into martial arts under the principle of them becoming they can manage themselves and they can physically do this and physically do that, but there's deeper deeper boots to fill than that, then you get them much more resonant within themselves. So my question that I get asked quite a lot is, how do we know which sensei, which school, which teacher to take, which teacher to take your children to learn from? And in there, you've kind of covered it very, very eloquently, such beautiful eloquence. And if I'm by memory, you've got about 10 points of how to identify. Would it be possible just to brief over those points in case anybody's thinking right now, how can they take, or how can they choose a school as in a sensei that can bring some resonance to their children?
Absolutely, absolutely. The 10 points are actually in the third book. And those 10 points are actually aligned. There's 20 points, 10 for teachers and 10 for students. So, and that chapter is called Surrender, No Retreat, right? And it's a spin on No Retreat, No Surrender, all right? Again, an 80s movie.
Awesome.
And the idea behind Surrender, No Retreat is if you surrender to your teacher, then and really give it all, then your teacher needn't retreat and withdraw from teaching you, and you as a student neither retreat because you're not getting what you want. So everything has to start with a surrender. So there are 10 points in there, but there's 3 key points, because you're coming from the angle of parents, right?
Yes, parents specifically.
So from a parent standpoint, really, what I would, if I can share 3 points.
Please do. I'd love you to. Please.
I would say first and foremost is do your homework and understand the motivation that the instructor has for teaching, right? And I'm not saying if they teach for commercial reasons it's bad, it's not. But what is their ultimate motivation? Because if it is biased, then your child's not going to get the best out of it. And the Bushido code is really powerful and can become an integral part of your child's DNA. And if they can live by it, they can cultivate that to live the martial way, to really self-discovery, self-realization. And if you want to put them on that path, you need to find a teacher that understands that is not only preaches that, but is practices that and is an expression of that on a daily basis. And you'll know, and you have to visit that place, have that direct interaction with the Sifu, the sensei, the teacher.
And there's something that you just pointed out there, the Bushido code. Can you just give us a very quick one line just to explain what the Bushido code is?
So the Bushido code is a set of key characteristics that a martial, to live the martial way. And it contains, again, off the top of my head, things like loyalty, honesty, courage, mercy is one of them. You should have mercy.
Wow.
And I think there's 2-3 others as well.
Yes, absolutely. And obviously they're relevant to each one of the actual martial arts as well. But when we talk about mercy in specific, I'll ask you about that in a moment, but please do continue with the other 2 points which are relevant to that as well, if you can.
So the other 2 points, the second point I'd say is once you've found the right person, the right school, the right environment that's going to nurture your child, remember, don't go into it thinking that, this is cheap babysitting, right? Because that is a common thing. Really look at martial arts as a way to bring and tap into your child's infinite potential that has been within that child from the moment they came to this planet.
Wow.
And took human form. Secondly is then to surrender to that teacher, because you have absolute belief that that teacher will peel away those layers to reveal that inside the child.
I love it.
As part of that journey. And the third I'd say is walk before you can run. Advise your child to walk before you can run, because our society is a very fast food society. We want everything within 3 minutes or less, if not now. And unfortunately, you have to do the work, and there's no shortcut. And as a consequence, I would say walk before you can run. And I want to tag one more onto that is martial arts is not something you should put your child into for a short course will whet the appetite potentially, but do it as a lifelong way of living.
Wow.
Living those values, because whatever happens in the dojo, there's a point where you transcend those learnings into daily life and you
Wow.
start living the martial way. And we'd met, my dad has a saying, it's a Punjabi saying actually, Hati da Kora, and in English it literally translates to elephant of horse, right? Which is really the hare and the tortoise, right? It's the equivalent story to that. And
Yes.
it's basically saying, don't burn yourself out like a sprinting horse, right? Take the long-term journey like the elephant that can travel hundreds of miles without stopping. And that's how you should really look at the martial journey. It's
Wow.
self-cultivation.
So deep, so deep. That's beautiful. I told you that we would run very, very short on time very quickly. Did you believe that 15 minutes have gone past just like that? And we haven't even started conversations. If anybody would like to get hold of this, because I still haven't touched on you, I think I'm going to have you back here without a doubt, Lak, if you do have the time early next year. There is one thing I want to specifically ask yourself, because you touched on the point where you said about somebody who's going to unlock something within your child to make them more. Now, there's something that you specifically say, and I'd say that I would have usually asked this sort of wisdom question at the end, but it's very important and poignant right now. There is something that you share with your own children, don't you, in the same way, in the same vein. Please, would you mind just sharing something?
So I don't only believe I have my own personal experience of this, but you choose the families you're going to go to for spiritual cultivation, so you can ascend that teaching and then evolve. And as part of that journey, you choose your parents. So when my children, and I've got a daughter and a son, when they are potentially not listening, or there's some conflict in whatever the topic of discussion is at that moment in time, I haven't had to say this often, but when I do say it, and less than a handful of times I have said this, I've turned around and said, you chose me as your father. You chose me to be your custodian within this lifetime, help you reveal that which you are in this existence, so that you can live to your true, authentic, high self. Please let me do my spiritual duty as your custodian within physical existence in this lifetime, so that you can live your truest, highest potential and shine onto the world and future generations to come as bright as possible.
Wow.
I'll be honest with you, not once have they ever come back from that.
Yeah.
And they have accepted that, because this is, when I say that, and again, I end up going in a different way of being at that moment when I say that, because it's outside of me that's talking, and they even know that. And we all know that we're far greater than what we appear, the illusion.
Perception. That's right. Yes.
And yeah, so
this is beautiful. So lovely. So this means that basically, in essence, that's very much similar to the crafting of conversation that you said, where martial arts can act upon this. You as a father and Nina as a mother, as parents between yourself, are there to assist to unlock this inner potential within the light of your children and in this current existence, their current life.
Yeah.
This is just beautiful. Thank you very much for sharing such great wisdom in a deep way. Like, if somebody wants to get hold of this book, because I'll tell you now, you have just smashed it in the garden. There's 3 books. Can you please tell us each book's title, and also where we can get hold of them, please, and how somebody can get hold of you?
Absolutely. So the first one's called Master Your Life, and it's 9 steps to cultivate self-mastery, inspired by Bruce Lee. So a lot of reverse engineered philosophies and principles that Bruce taught. So that's the first one. The second one is called The Art of Thinking Without Thinking.
Do you have a copy at all to see them, if you don't mind? Just see the first one, which was Master Your Life, which is the one I loved. I was on the launch of that, I can remember, some years ago.
And for the listeners, if you may not know this, but Sukhi was an integral part to sparking that. And I would say lighting my candle so I can light other people's candles.
That's just so beautifully said, and very, very humbly said. I think you've overexpress that, because I think we all just have a little journey and a part of it. Again, your light was inevitable. In the conscious words of Thanos, I was. You were inevitable. It just happened that I was maybe one of the stepping stones in your journey, and for that I forever help. Thank you. And considering you're such a landed individual who's respected that space, thank you very much for that as well. Your second book?
Second one, The Art of Thinking Without Thinking. And this book is full of lots of images, but is Zen koan inspired type delivery of teachings.
Easy reading, in other words. It seems very thick, but it seems like very easy reading in comparative, yes?
Idea is to take one Zen koan at a time. The title is the Zen koan. Sit into meditative space, read the title, and let the teachings come to you through. If you think logically, it won't work. The book explains it in more detail.
Thinking without thinking, that's right, yes.
But you've got to have a holistic mindset. So in order to receive intuitively, from outside through to you, you have to learn the art of not thinking, hence why it's called The Art of Thinking Without Thinking. And then the last one is Original Truth. That's this one. And this is about cultivating your conscious warrior and taking those some really key, seldom talked about topics and applying them to daily life. For instance, one of the most pressing topics is if you've been in an altercation, the aftermath of shame. How do you deal with that? Now, that could be a mental, verbal conflict that you have with someone, and the shame, and how do you deal with that? And that chapter is called Shama. And just to share one more teaching very quickly is, we fight for love. And people might think, well, how can we fight for love? Well, you fight for love of yourself, your ego. You fight for love of some object you like, your car, your phone, whatever. Somebody damages it, you're going to get upset. Or you fight for the love of somebody else, a loved family member or close friend. Wow. So you fight for these reasons. If you fight for love, then the resolution for that is through love.
Wow. Brilliant balance.
So that's one of the compelling lessons in there.
Beautiful. So the cause as well as the solution is within itself. Yeah. So people perceive love as just a positive energy. It is, but it can be deemed incorrectly and can power incorrectly if you don't know what you're doing with it and being conscious with it. It's lovely. Truly, truly amazing. I can't believe how fast this time's going. If somebody wants to get hold of yourself directly, Lak, how can they do that?
So just go online on martialmindpower.com. That's MARTIAL mindpower.com. And the books are available on Amazon.
But how can they actually follow? Because I think you're a very heavy content deliverer as well. Do you have a YouTube channel?
We have YouTube on, it's called Martial Mind Power. We have Facebook, Martial Mind Power as well. Yeah. We have Instagram, Martial Mind Power.
Wonderful. Perfectly synchronized. Beautiful. And you've done talks as well, which we'll talk about in the next episode. I just want to ask you a particular point here. I really wish I could have another hour with you, but there's a question that we always ask individuals that it's kind of what we call it the epitaph moment. Sorry to just spring it upon you, but if there was such a thing as an epitaph on your passing into the light, which inevitably all of us are going to go through the journey in a positive way. If it said, "Here lies Lak Loi, the man who," what would it be?
Here lies Lak Loi, the man who came to heal, reveal, and return people back home.
Oh, just beautiful. Heal, reveal. So heal them as an individual, getting rid of the ego and out of themselves, reveal the beauty and the love that was within them, and then
return them back home.
Return them back to their self, their truth, which is where you said before. Wow, beautiful.
And also to our ethereal home.
Yeah, that's right. The connection between
our primordial source.
Where the whole is in the part and the part is in the whole, which you say quite regularly, the universe is within you, right? I love it. And sorry, I have to ask you one more question, I'm afraid. If there was any wisdom that you would like to leave with people this evening, our listeners, what would it be? What quote gets you out of pick-me-up, we call it?
So when you end up in a place of surrender, the one extract from the Japji that really resonates with me is Hukam Rajai Chalna, Nanak Likhya Naam. And that basically means the divine instruction is with you, and universal intelligence will guide you there. So
that's actually the Sikh literacy and Sikh scholarship that seeds there within the Siddhi Guru Granth Sahib Ji, which is our living Sikh Guru. And so that was the sharing you said there. And so what does this do to you though?
It frees you. It frees me from everything, as the Mandalorian would say. This is the way.
Only you could have brought the Mandalorian into this one. And Jatinder, I'm sure that one's for you as well, if you're listening tonight, and Amanjot for our two other brothers who are a part of our quad. Honestly, on behalf of the Salam Radio crew, our community, the Inspired Tribe, myself, Sukhi Wahiwala, and all of my tribe globally, which follow us in this series, the Empower Hour show, we thank you from the bottom of our heart, Master Lak Loi, for being our episode 69 guest. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me, and thanks to everybody, all the viewers and listeners, for taking their evenings to spend time with us today.
Bless you. And for everybody else, please tune in the same time next week, which is going to be every Tuesday between 7 and 8, where we will bring you another revered guest who's going to be absolutely lightning with wisdom, knowledge, and actually giving you the true understanding of life that, like we spoke with Lak today, where he went through some dark times in his life, but he's found something. So realizing that when you're down, something is given to you to pull you out of that darkness by yourself and by your journey. Beautifully said by Lak. Please do rewind back if you just joined us, scrub back to what she said. Thank you very much once again.